Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to my channel. Let me ask you something. Have you ever walked into a room and felt invisible, like the spark you once carried now flickers under the weight of time? Unnoticed by younger eyes that once might have lit up in your presence. I want you to forget that feeling, because real attraction, the kind that pulls someone in like gravity, doesn't wrinkle, it deepens. It's not about chasing youth, it's about embodying depth. The truth is, younger women aren't only drawn to looks or swagger, they're drawn to a presence, a confidence that doesn't need to shout, a man who doesn't perform but invites, who doesn't impress but understands. There is something irresistibly magnetic about a man who knows who he is. He's lived, he's learned, and he's no longer looking to win the game, because he understands now he is the game. So if you're ready to rediscover that edge, not as a gimmick, but as a truth you carry in your bones, this video is for you. We're not here for tricks. We're here for intimacy, psychology, and the art of subtle power. Have you ever sat across from someone much younger, maybe in a coffee shop or a quiet bar, and felt that subtle dance between curiosity and self-doubt? Maybe her laugh caught your attention, or the way she tucked her hair behind her ear stirred something long dormant in you, and for a moment you wondered, could there be something here? Not just attraction but connection, the possibility of play, of mystery, of being seen again, not as someone older but as someone whole. What I want you to understand is this: flirting is not about pick-up lines. It's not about pretending to be 25 again. It's not about having more hair or a faster car. It's about the space between two people and how you invite her into that space with your presence. Because women, especially younger women, are often starving for exactly what older men tend to underestimate: depth, clarity, groundedness. Flirting in its truest form is psychological, it's relational, it's emotional intelligence wrapped in curiosity. It's not something you do, it's something you evoke. So let's talk about the first way older men naturally attract younger women, often without even realizing it. It's emotional composure. You see, most young women are constantly navigating chaos, ghosting, hot and cold texts, mixed signals, a dating culture built on uncertainty. Now here you come, a man who isn't panicked by silence, who doesn't need to prove himself in 1,000 words, who knows how to sit with tension and not unravel. There is a calm in your energy, a safety in your gaze. That stillness, it's powerful. When you don't chase, when you don't over-explain, when you lean back with a subtle smile and say, "Tell me more about that," you're giving her something no one else is. Space to be seen, permission to speak, the assurance that you won't crumble under her emotions or opinions. You become an anchor in a world of turbulence. And that composure isn't about being stoic or emotionless. It's about being aware of your emotions and choosing when and how to share them. That's the kind of maturity that's magnetic. She sees in you a man who's already survived his ego and came out softer, not smaller, which brings me to the second and possibly most underestimated flirting power you have as an older man: your ability to listen. And I don't mean nodding while you wait for your turn to speak. I mean really listening, with your eyes, with your body, with your attention. You're not checking your phone, you're not interrupting, you're not trying to solve her feelings. You're simply there, tracking her story like it matters, because it does. Do you know how rare that is? Young women are constantly talking to boys who are half checked out, who are waiting for their moment to impress, to escalate. When you instead lean in and ask, "How did that make you feel?" you are touching her in a way no one else has. It's not about what you say, it's about how present you are. Presence is the sexiest energy in any room, because presence means I am here with you fully. And when she feels that, truly feels it, it opens her. Not because you forced it, but because you made her feel emotionally safe. This is what so many men miss. They chase desire with performance, but desire blooms in presence. And so we begin to see something very interesting. That older men don't have to compete with younger men. They don't have to be louder or more charming. In fact, the most effective flirting happens when you do less, but mean more. Let's pause there for a second. Can you recall the last time you really made a woman feel like the only person in the room? Not with flattery, but with your attention. With the way your eyes didn't dart to your phone. With the way you let silence linger before answering. With the way you smiled at her story like it was the best thing you heard all week. This is not a trick, it's a way of being. And it's so rare. It feels electric. Now, once she feels safe, emotionally and energetically, her desire begins to rise. And that's where we touch the third powerful tool older men often bring into flirting: emotional contrast. You're calm, yes, but you're not boring. You're grounded, but you're not passive. You surprise her. Maybe in the middle of a conversation about something serious, you say something playful, teasing but kind. And she laughs, not because you're being a clown, but because you reminded her of something vital. Playfulness doesn't belong only to the young. A lot of older men mistakenly fall into the role of the wise advisor or the serious mentor, but attraction doesn't live in wisdom alone. It lives in polarity, in the unexpected. You want to show her that you can be both deep and light, both thoughtful and bold, both soft and teasing. That emotional range is magnetic. It tells her that this isn't going to be predictable, that you haven't flatlined into the routine of your life, that you're still capable of spark. She's not just looking at your age, she's feeling your energy. And when your energy says, I know who I am, and I still know how to play, her body listens. There's something deeply erotic about that kind of contrast. She sees a man who doesn't need her validation, and yet chooses to engage her, who can sit in silence, and then catch her off guard with a story that makes her laugh from her stomach. So much of flirting is in the rhythm. The dance between being known and being mysterious, between inviting and retreating, between steadiness and spontaneity. You as an older man have lived enough to know what matters. But you're also still curious. You're not jaded. You're not bitter. You've turned your past into wisdom, not walls. And that more than anything is the aphrodisiac. Because younger women aren't always looking for someone their own age. They're looking for someone who feels like a doorway. Someone who opens something in them. Who doesn't just impress them, but affects them. And flirting, real, embodied, psychological flirting, is about effect. So when you walk into that room again, remember this: you don't have to compete with youth. You have something it doesn't: stillness, depth, perspective. And the choice to engage, not from need, but from fullness. Let's keep going, because once you understand the psychological pull behind real attraction, it's hard to unsee it. We talked about emotional composure, about presence, about contrast. These are the deeper undercurrents. But now we move into something that often surprises people. It's your slowness. Yes, slowness. You see, we live in a culture of instant gratification, fast texts, fast food, fast dates, fast sex. And while all of that may be exciting, it rarely leaves a lasting impression. It becomes disposable, predictable, flat. But the man who moves slowly, who doesn't rush through the moments, he becomes unforgettable. Why? Because he feels rare. Imagine this: a younger woman meets you, and she's expecting what she always gets: rushed attention, a quick compliment, the subtle or not so subtle invitation to escalate. But instead, you move differently. You notice, you take your time. You let the conversation unfold like a jazz piece instead of a scripted routine. This kind of slowness is intoxicating, not because it drags, but because it signals presence. It says, I'm not in a hurry to get somewhere else. I'm already here, and you're interesting enough to stay with. This isn't performance, it's participation. And psychologically, slowness builds tension. Not the uncomfortable kind, but the kind that makes attraction simmer. It creates a sense of suspense, of longing, of wanting to know what's coming next, and trusting that it's worth waiting for. You become a novel in a world of tweets. And here's the twist: it's not about being passive. It's about deliberate pacing. It's the way you touch her arm mid-conversation and then pull back with ease. It's the way you look at her, hold the gaze just a second longer than expected, then shift your attention like it was no big deal. It's the contrast between availability and mystery that makes you feel alive in her imagination. She begins to ask questions in her mind. Who is this man? Why does he feel different? Why am I thinking about him when he said so little? Because you said less. But it meant more. Let me bring you into the fifth and arguably most sensual element of older men's flirting power: curiosity without control. Many men, especially younger ones, fall into a trap. They try to steer the conversation. They dominate. They want to impress, to persuade, to conquer. But you, if you're grounded in your age and experience, you don't need to do that. You're not trying to lead her somewhere. You're discovering her. And when you're truly curious about a woman, her story, her thoughts, her contradictions, she feels seen, but not analyzed, not controlled, just revealed. It's a deeply erotic experience to be discovered slowly. So when you ask her a question like, what's something about you most people never take the time to see? You're not just gathering data, you're inviting intimacy. This kind of curiosity is not about collecting facts. It's about creating space. You don't need to interrupt or redirect. You don't need to match her story with yours. You simply stay with her words, like you're savoring a taste you've never tried before. And in doing so, you create a mirror. She starts to see herself differently through your attention. Do you understand how rare that is? Because the world is constantly asking women to shrink, to be agreeable, to perform. And here you are showing her that she doesn't need to perform to be fascinating. That being herself fully is already enough. That is where trust is built. That is where desire begins to root. And there's something else that happens when you truly embody this energy. It's the sixth secret that often goes unspoken, but is felt deeply. You are selective. Not because you think you're better, but because you're clear. You don't flirt with everyone. You don't throw compliments around like confetti. You don't need every woman to like you. And that, paradoxically, makes you more desirable. Because she senses that your attention is earned, not scattered. She doesn't feel like one of many. She feels chosen, not possessed, not claimed, but chosen because you took the time to see her. And you still chose to stay. This kind of selectiveness is powerful because it means you have standards. You're not lonely. You're not desperate. You're not trying to fill a void. You're enjoying your life. And if someone adds to it, wonderful. But if not, you're still whole. That self-containment, it's radiant. You become the man who walks into the room with nothing to prove. And yet everyone takes notice. Not because you're the loudest, but because your energy is coherent. You're not looking for permission to belong. You already do. Wherever you go, you carry home inside of you. And finally, we land on one of the most profoundly attractive qualities you have, especially as an older man. One that no amount of youth or beauty can replace. One that women, especially those searching for something real, will always crave. It's your emotional integrity. You don't say things you don't mean. You don't play games. You don't bait and switch. When you say you'll call, you do. When you say you're interested, you show up. And if something changes, you communicate. That kind of honesty is gold. Because let's be honest, a lot of younger men hide behind ambiguity. They want the benefits of closeness without the responsibility of clarity. But you've outgrown that. You know that intimacy without responsibility is just self-serving. So when you flirt, you do it from a place of alignment. You're not afraid of desire. You're not afraid of feelings, but you're also not afraid of being honest if the connection isn't right. That kind of integrity doesn't just attract women, it earns respect. You become the man who can handle her emotions without running, who can handle her boundaries without pushing, who can handle her truth without retreating. And that makes you unforgettable. Because in the end, real attraction isn't just about chemistry. It's about emotional safety. It's about feeling seen, heard, and wanted, not as a fantasy, but as a full human being. So here you are, not trying to be younger, not trying to impress, but simply being present, playful, grounded, curious, and real. And that is the kind of man a woman doesn't forget. That is the kind of man she dreams about after the conversation ends. That is the kind of man who doesn't need tricks, because he is the invitation. So now we find ourselves at an important crossroad, not between strategy and manipulation, but between truth and embodiment. By now, you've realized something. These so-called tricks aren't about tricking anyone. They're about revealing something. In her, yes, but first in you. You see, the final pieces of attraction don't come from trying harder. They come from relaxing into who you already are and who you're still becoming. The last key, perhaps the most magnetic of all, is your self-possession. You know who you are. You don't need validation. You've made peace with your mistakes. You've buried parts of yourself, sure, and maybe you're still learning how to unearth them. But you're not performing. You're not reaching for someone to fix you or fill the silence. You're simply arriving fully, authentically, and that level of presence, that internal authority, is like standing in front of a fire that doesn't burn but warms you all the way through. You don't need to dominate the room because the room responds to your stillness. You don't need to be the center of attention because your energy centers. You don't need to posture or puff your chest. Your gravity speaks for you. You are no longer chasing, you are choosing. And she feels that. Every word, every pose, every smile, it carries weight because it comes from a man who is anchored in his life, not floating in search of meaning. This is not the kind of flirtation that fades once the evening ends. This is the kind that lingers in her mind for days, weeks, sometimes years. Not because you seduced her, but because you saw her. That's the power of self-possession. But let's not romanticize maturity without grounding it in truth. This kind of clarity is often born of pain, of heart touch, of mistakes you swore you'd never make again, of learning, sometimes the hard way, what integrity costs and why it's always worth it. So when you sit across from a younger woman and she senses your presence, what she's actually sensing is your inner landscape. And if that inner world is rich, if it's been tilled and softened and allowed to grow, she'll feel it. Because real flirting isn't an act. It's a transmission. It's not about the perfect line. It's about the energy behind the words. And that energy says, I have been through storms. I have lost people. I have lost myself. And yet here I am, not bitter, but better, not guarded, but wiser, not closed, but clear. And if you're lucky enough to sit with me, you'll feel that warmth too. This is where we must take a deep breath and pause, not to slow down the story, but to recognize what's really happening here. Flirting is not about manipulating attention. It's about awakening intimacy. And intimacy is not built on seduction. It's built on honesty. So what happens when an older man flirts with a younger woman from a place of deep authenticity? She doesn't just see him. She feels herself more clearly in his presence. His attention becomes a mirror, not a mask, a safe container, not a performance stage. He isn't trying to control her response. He's simply inviting her into a moment, a real moment, where curiosity meets safety, where desire meets respect, where mystery meets kindness. And here's where psychology backs everything we've discussed. According to emotional intelligence research, particularly from the work of Daniel Goleman and intimacy theorists like Esther Perel, what women, especially emotionally intelligent, self-aware younger women, truly crave is attunement. Attunement means, I feel you feeling me. It's when two nervous systems begin to regulate together, when silence isn't awkward, when a shared laugh has no punchline, when glances carry more weight than monologues. That's attunement. And older men, particularly those who have done the emotional work, are often more capable of it than their younger counterparts. Why? Because they're not distracted by the performance. They're not trying to be liked. They're listening. They're paying attention. They're interested. And they show it with subtlety, not spectacle. And this is the paradox: the more grounded you are, the more magnetic you become. So what do we do with this knowledge? We embody it, not as a game, not as a tactic, but as a practice. You enter every interaction with the awareness that you are the environment. Your tone, your pace, your gaze, these are invitations. Your silence, an instrument. Your curiosity, a bridge. Your presence, a permission slip for her to drop the mask. And the woman you attract through this kind of energy is not someone you impress. She's someone you affect deeply, subtly, honestly, because attraction isn't always loud. It's often quiet, slow, subversive, but unforgettable. So here's what I want you to hear as we bring this part of the conversation to a close. You don't need to be anyone else to be desirable. You don't need to chase youth. You are what youth longs for when it grows tired of surface. You don't need tricks, because truth embodied fully is the most seductive force in the world. And yes, flirting is still a dance. It's a moment of play, of possibility. But the game changes when you realize that it's not about getting her. It's about showing up, because the man who truly shows up, in his eyes, in his voice, in his presence, becomes unforgettable. He's not trying to convince her of anything. He's simply being someone she never knew she needed until now. And now we're here, at the point where all of this begins to come together. You've moved through presence, emotional intelligence, slowness, curiosity, and self-possession. But now comes something more nuanced, something that isn't often spoken about directly but is felt deeply when it's there. It's erotic humility, not humiliation, not self-deprecation, but the humility that comes from having truly lived, from having loved and lost, succeeded and failed, and still showing up open-hearted. It's the humility of a man who is not trying to impress her with his perfection, but is captivating because of his imperfection. You've stopped pretending you have it all figured out. You've stopped needing to dominate every room, win every point, control every outcome. You've made peace with the parts of yourself that were once ashamed, and now you carry those scars with grace. There's nothing sexier than a man who doesn't hide his story but also doesn't perform it. He wears it like a well-aged leather jacket. Lived in, real, familiar, beautiful. And when you speak from that place, not of trying to win her over, but simply being with her, allowing her to see your humanity, it breaks down walls. Because now, instead of seduction being a mask you wear, it becomes a natural byproduct of your truth. Women, especially younger women, are often overexposed to bravado. They're tired of perfection, exhausted by men trying to sell them a curated identity. And when you sit there steady in your truth, not trying to be more, not afraid to be less, you become magnetic. Humility invites intimacy, because there is no intimacy without vulnerability. And flirting, at its highest level, is an invitation to intimacy, not in a physical sense alone, but emotional, intellectual, energetic. It says, I see you. I want to know you. I'm not here to conquer. I'm here to meet you. But here's the beautiful paradox. When you bring that humility, that openness, that quiet strength, the sexual tension doesn't disappear. It intensifies, because now the erotic isn't just about chemistry. It's about connection. It's the glance you hold when she challenges your opinion. It's the way you gently touch her lower back, not to claim her, but to say, I'm here if you want me to be. It's the quiet restraint in your voice when the conversation turns playful and you could take it somewhere suggestive, but you don't. Not yet. Because you're not here to rush. You're here to savor. And that restraint, that kind of slow burn, is erotic gold. Desire lives in the space between curiosity and containment, in the ability to hold back, not because you're afraid, but because you know that timing creates tension. And tension, when held with care, creates arousal. You flirt with energy, with awareness, with intention, and you don't need to rely on sexual innuendos or rehearsed compliments to create that attraction. You simply attune yourself to the moment. Maybe it's the way you notice a detail, the color of her nail polish, the cadence in her voice when she talks about her childhood, the softness in her face when she talks about someone she misses. These are not things you can fake. You have to be there to see them. And when you reflect them back, not in a performative way, but in a real, simple statement, that memory seems really tender for you. It creates heat. Why? Because it's not just intellectual connection anymore. It's emotional resonance. You're not just flirting with her body. You're flirting with her entire being. And here's where the true power of an older man comes to life. It's not about what you say, it's about what she feels in your presence. Does she feel rushed, judged, measured, or does she feel safe, intrigued, seen? When you are fully embodied, not trying to seduce, but simply open, honest, and tuned in, you allow her to drop her defenses, and that's when true flirtation becomes possible, because now she's not performing either. She's laughing without worrying if she looks silly. She's sharing things she doesn't usually share. She's asking you questions not out of politeness, but out of real interest. Because something in you has invited her to be real. That's not a trick, that's art. And let's not overlook one final truth, a deeper truth that runs through all of this. The erotic doesn't live in what's obvious. It lives in what's alive. Flirting is aliveness. It's the charge between two people that says there's something here, maybe fleeting, maybe lasting, but real. And older men who embrace their depth, their pace, their curiosity, their sensuality, often radiate more aliveness than their younger counterparts because they're not distracted, they're not fragmented, they're not seeking from emptiness, they're offering from fullness. That is what makes her lean in. That is what makes her text you the next day. That is what makes her tell her friends, there's just something about him. Because she doesn't have the words, and she doesn't need them, she just feels it. The way you made her feel more like herself, the way you gave her space instead of pressure, the way your eyes smiled before your lips did, the way your silence was an invitation, not a punishment, the way you weren't afraid of her, not her opinions, not her boundaries, not her depth, because you've danced with your own. And now, finally, you've begun to understand the truth that lies beneath it all. Flirting isn't about getting her. Flirting is about being with her, fully, openly, without agenda. You are no longer a man chasing attention. You are the man who knows how to hold it. And when you hold it, with integrity, with care, with warmth, she feels it, not just in her mind, but in her breath, in her chest, in her nervous system. And that is how attraction is born, not from lines, but from presence, not from game, but from grace, not from force, but from feeling. And you, my dear man, have earned the right to flirt like that, not because you know everything, but because you've become everything you needed to be. So here we are. At the end, yet not an end, because this is not a list of tricks to file away. It's a reclamation, a remembering of what you once knew in your bones, before the world told you to be impressive instead of intimate, before age became something to hide rather than something to inhabit, before flirting became a performance instead of a presence. The truth is, the most attractive man in the room isn't always the one who walks in first. It's the one who takes his time, who walks in without announcing himself, who listens more than he speaks, who knows that his power isn't in what he does, but in how he sees. So if you've been wondering whether you've missed your window, whether youth is required for attraction, for magnetism, for desire, let me tell you something that every woman who has truly known herself will agree with. It's not youth she wants. It's depth. It's clarity. It's the man who can hold her gaze without flinching, who isn't trying to fix her, save her, or seduce her, but who chooses in this moment to simply be with her. There's nothing more erotic than being fully met. And you, my friend, have lived long enough to offer that. You felt the sting of failure and the fire of passion. You've stood at gravesides and wedding altars. You've made love, and maybe you've also made mistakes, but through it all you've grown, and now you carry something younger men can't fake: earned wisdom. And with that wisdom comes the ability to flirt in a way that is effortless, not casual, but effortless, because it's no longer coming from need. It's not a tool. It's not a transaction. It's an offering. You don't need her to complete you. You're already whole. You don't need her to validate you. You've already accepted yourself. And when you flirt from that place, from wholeness, it's irresistible, because now it's not about the outcome, it's about the moment. You don't need it to turn into something more. You're simply present with what is, and paradoxically, that's what makes her want more, because the most powerful form of desire is born in freedom, not in pressure. So flirt gently, flirt playfully, flirt honestly. Let your voice carry warmth, let your silence carry strength, let your presence carry peace, and trust that the right woman, the woman who is ready to meet you there, will feel it. She will feel the difference between the man who wants her body and the man who wants her presence, between the man who performs for attention and the man who listens for connection, between the man who tries to impress and the man who simply is impressive because he's real and kind and grounded. Now let's be honest, there will still be times you doubt this. Times the world will tell you that age makes you invisible, that youth is the currency of attraction. But I want you to remember this moment, this conversation, this truth, that real attraction doesn't fade. It matures, it deepens, it sharpens into something even more potent. And when you learn to channel that, when you lean into the quiet, grounded, emotionally present man you've become, there is no room you cannot light up, not by being loud, but by being alive. So take this wisdom not as a manual, but as a mirror. Hold it to yourself. Look at who you are now. Not just a man with years behind him, but a man who is still choosing to grow, to play, to connect. That's what makes you irresistible. Not your lines, not your abs, not your bank account, but your capacity to feel and to invite her to feel too. Because in a world full of noise, you become a moment of quiet. In a world of speed, you become slowness. In a world of games, you become a safe place to land. So now I want to turn this moment back to you. How have you flirted lately? Not just with women, but with life. How have you allowed yourself to be seen? How have you created space for another person to open just by being fully present? And if it's been a while, that's okay. That's why we're here. To remember, to reawaken what was never truly lost, only forgotten. Now I want to hear from you. What resonated with you today? Have you ever felt that shift from trying to impress to simply being present? Have you experienced that connection with someone younger who surprised you? Let me know in the comments. Let's start a real conversation, because your story, your truth, is not only valuable, it's vital. And if this spoke to you, if something in you stirred, if you felt seen, I invite you to share this with a friend who might need it too. someone who's forgotten how magnetic they already are. And if you'd like more conversations like this, make sure you subscribe to the channel. We go deep here, we speak truth, and we make space for the kind of wisdom that doesn't age you, it ripens. Because love, romance, flirtation, they're not reserved for the young, they're reserved for the awake. So here's to you, to your presence, to your slow glances and steady hands, to your laughter and your scars, to the man you are and the man you're still becoming. Here's to flirting, not to impress, but to connect, to invite, to see and be seen. Here's to living with desire even now, especially now, because age doesn't make you less of a man, it makes you more of one.